Standing here is the most mysterious building in Grayslake. The plain white building disappearing amongst the more lively parts of downtown Grayslake. Almost as if it's an abandoned building, nobody seems to go in, and nobody seems to go out. The lack of attention given to the former church by the public makes it a perfect meeting spot for an organization that thrives on invisibility. To truly understand the significance of the Rising Sun Lodge, it is important to go back to the very beginning.
The Freemasons have one of the largest and oldest secret fraternities in the world. It stretches so far back that many recognizable historical figures have been a part of the secret society, including George Washington. While the true origins of the organization are largely unknown, the most prominent theory regarding the Freemasons is that they descended directly from the stonemasons of the medieval age. The primitive forms of the organization's fraternities were huts that stonemasons gathered in for shelter. Eventually, this evolved into lodges with small governments and initiation ceremonies for new members. Throughout the 1600s, the organization began to evolve and grow, to the point of no longer being associated with the original stonemasons and being purely made up of these honorary gentleman masons. At some point in the 1700s, a regulatory body that controlled over 100 lodges formed. The Grand Lodge, as it was called, had a book of constitutions and served as a treasury for the organization's charity funds. However, there was dissent over the way the Grand Lodge ran the organization, allowing a rival lodge to appear. This new regulatory body intended to go back to the roots of Freemasonry, as they believed the original Grand Lodge had departed from the original institutions. Eventually, the two bodies merged into one, but the precedent had been set so that Masonic branches with differing ideals could be formed and still consider themselves a part of the larger organization. One of these branches was the Order of the Eastern Star. This branch was formed in 1850 and is open to both men and women, while a larger Masonic body is exclusively a fraternity. The Order of the Eastern Star emphasizes charity and service. While many of its charity efforts have focused on religion and assisting fellow Masons, the branch as a whole has also contributed tens of thousands of dollars to Alzheimer's, diabetes, and asthma research. The Rising Sun Lodge was built in 1855 and has since undergone various renovations. When it was first built, the building served as a church and remained that way for around a century. In 1955, the Freemasons moved in and established it as the Rising Sun Lodge. Freemasons had existed in Grayslake before that, but they were forced to move locations often before finally settling in this former church building. Today, the lodge holds a dinner and meeting once a month. Members must be Masons to begin with or pass a certain initiation process to become one. They pay $115 a year to maintain their status as a part of the lodge. The exclusivity of the meeting depends on which members are present. As a result, direct information about what goes on behind those doors is difficult to find. Members who have dedicated decades out of their lives to the organization aren't keen on revealing these secrets, and the younger, newer members don't have information on these secrets to begin with. At the surface level, it seems as if the lodge is no more than a fraternity that participates in charitable acts and gives to the community. It's possible that their secrecy is simply a method of assigning a greater sense of importance and purpose to what they are doing. While we didn't have high hopes about uncovering some well-hidden secrets about the Rising Sun Lodge, we thought it necessary to talk to someone who may know a little more than us about the subject.
So, you guys are familiar with the ideas of sororities and fraternities and stuff.
Yeah.
So, Freemasonry is basically that, which is a fraternity, and it's one of the longest standing fraternities in human history. So if you've seen movies like National Treasure and stuff like that, it's kind of a aggrandized version of it, but really what it is a group of guys, because it is a fraternity, that are out trying to help their communities in really quiet ways. The goal being to, trying to think of the simplest way to word this, to help out widows and orphans to get through tough times. So like you'll see like a Shriners Hospital that's Masons. My would have been older sister, my parents had a daughter between me and my oldest sister that passed away unfortunately, but when she was still alive, they took care of her for free back in the 80s at the Shriners Hospital. So Masons do things like that. You guys are probably familiar on social media. You'll see somebody do a good deed, but then instantly go talk about it and like applaud themselves and pat themselves on the back. Masons are the opposite. Okay. They'll do the good deed and then be in the dark and don't say anything about it. So you won't see a lot of them like publicized things about them unless you really go search it out. But it's the people that are generally in the background doing the right thing, helping people and whatnot without drawing attention to themselves. My grandfather was a Mason in Des Moines, and I really knew virtually nothing about it, except for that he had a gigantic ring on his finger that had a square and compass on it, and it was always just kind of a mystery to me. And then as he got older and as I got older as well, I started just ask questions about it because I didn't know what it was. And, as I learned more about it and, when he passed, my grandmother gave me all of his, like Masonic regalia, his Bible, his, all of his stuff, including cufflinks and his ring and all of that. I was working for a State Farm agent up in Grayslake as an employee, and the landlord would come in and I'd see the same ring on his hand. So eventually I started talking to him about it, and old guys like to talk. So of course he talked to me quite a bit about it. And eventually I asked him, what I had to do to be a part of it, and just kind of went through the process. You go through, the steps to become a Mason. So there's some of that you can't talk about, that you're not allowed to, but I'm sure if you Googled it, you can find somebody who spilled the beans. But a lot of it is just affirming that that you're a man of faith, that you believe the criteria that are consistent with the Masonic code, and that you agree to do right by your family, your community, and the members of the organization. No. That's actually a really interesting question, and you'll go back and you'll go through time and find that there were times where there were certain religious backgrounds that weren't openly welcomed into the Masons. But really the only requirement relative to religion is that you have a monotheistic God. Because we live in a world that is more about like shouting out loud, and whoever shouts the loudest wins, right? As an organization, it's not as prevalent as it once was, because being quiet and understated isn't as valued as it used to be. So, but yeah, the organization is filled with a lot of old guys and not too many people from my generation. I think for that reason.
Yeah. So. Do you know